I really believe that so much of children are who we raise them to be, not because just of their DNA, but because of how we walk through life with them.
What better person to talk to as a baby maker than somebody who works in third-party surrogacy and gamete donation, right? Welcome to the Baby Makers Pod.
Thank you so much, Janica. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm so honored that, to be sitting here with you. I've, known you for a while now, and I've heard so many wonderful things about you through the years. So I'm grateful to just be, a part of this.
That goes ditto. Our patients talk and we get to hear about one another, right? And then we actually finally made a meeting happen. And then it was like so obvious that we need to have a recorded conversation because between the two of us, we have so much perspective, experience, and information to share with women and couples who are finding that they need a little bit of help.
Yeah.
Right? It really comes down to that at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
I asked Dr. Beck, she was on the show not too long ago, and I asked her about surrogacy, and I said, how come it looks like it's harder for surrogates now? And she said, it's not actually. It's just that before they were primarily using younger eggs, donor eggs, and caring for gay men couples. So now, can you expand on what the use of a surrogate would be for? There's so many different scenarios.
So many different reasons. As you mentioned, the LGBT community, and of course, a lot of women who are having medical issues that make it difficult or impossible for them to carry. And those things range from anything, as you know, to, severe endometriosis, to uterine defects, to, previous, multiple miscarriages that cause scar tissue or Asherman syndrome. People, unfortunately, who've gone through cancer and who are on, preventative medications that don't allow them to carry, people who have autoimmune conditions like lupus, and a lot of women who, would like to have a second or third child and maybe in their previous delivery had like a creta or placenta previa, or perhaps, I had one client who hemorrhaged during her birth and she had to have a hysterectomy.
Mm-hmm.
So there are, really a lot of medical reasons why, women are unable to carry, that I think as time has gone on, women have gotten older and have also, realize so much more of like what these issues can be, that we really are seeing, more diagnoses as opposed to just this idea of unexplained infertility.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. We're being able to really fine tune, bring our focus into what is it and how wonderful that is, right? For the answer, as we want to get the people as complete as possible on their journey psychologically. You have a background as a psychologist, right?
Yeah, I do. So I was a marriage and family therapist with private practice, seeing patients struggling with infertility for about 12, 13 years. I also worked with other, presenting problems such as anxiety and depression and things like that. But I did see a lot of infertility patients and then, really got a sense of what that struggle looks like and what people go through, which has definitely helped me, I think, in, this new way that I'm working, and also just in my own journey that kind of came up while I was treating people and experiencing, like the miscarriages and all the infertility and complications that I myself had too.
Yeah, that, isn't that how it goes here, at least for the baby makers community?
Yeah.
A personal experience that becomes a life purpose, right? Or it defines us. But I think it's like it was decided and then we showed up for it and we ran with it, right? So helping others is so rewarding. It can be very challenging. And also we're empathic. So we come to really want it for these women. And I want to say a third party or a need for a third party is not a failure. It's not a consolation prize. It's an opportunity to become a mom or a parent when it seemed like it wasn't going to happen. Do you explain it like that to your patients or your clients?
I do. I think in the way of my experience, just because where I started in my journey and where I ended up, I think it depends too on the client. Some people will come to me and they're kind of like processed through it. They're feeling good. They're ready to go. And then some people come to me and it's just the news they received and they are still at that point where they feel like, yeah, this is the less desirable option and this isn't what I pictured. And, I think on top of that, they've also been through so much that it's also like, okay, I'm exploring this option and I also don't have much hope it's going to work. So, because things haven't worked. So I think, what I always say is like be in the moment that you're at, feel whatever it is you need to feel. Don't force yourself to be any place different. I should be excited about this. I should be grateful. I should be some people that wouldn't have this opportunity. But I think that doesn't mean that it's not a trajectory, that you won't get to a different place with it. And it's not a forever feeling. Most feelings are not forever. They're fleeting, whether it's happiness or sadness. So I think from my own experience, I really came into using a surrogate with a lot of feelings of failure, of envy for people who could carry themselves, of fear about what that was going to take away from me, feeling like it was a sacrifice, and having to kind of swallow that pill and move forward because I wanted so badly to be a parent. But what I really saw, and I think what made me really passionate about helping people, especially using surrogates or egg donors or sperm donors, is I really saw how that changed, and while journeys are not always obstacle free, as we know, I saw kind of like how I came out the other side. And now knowing that like all of my fears did not come to fruition, that like I am so at a place of gratitude, even so much so that like the journey and how beautiful it was, almost like I feel lucky, and I know for someone that's at the beginning of their journey, that's really hard to see and understand, especially when you're struggling with hope. But I think really the main thing is like take it one step at a time, be where you're at, and things do change.
As far as you saying that you feel lucky, it might help the listener to understand how fortunate you feel if we have a little bit of your backstory.
Yeah, of course. So I started out, trying to have a baby naturally when I was about 33 years old. It was a little bit late because I guess it depends how you look at it, but I felt it was late. And I, because I'd been building a career and, my husband and I got married and I had no real sense. I mean, of course I'd seen patients, so I knew had awareness people did struggle, but I didn't really have an idea that that would be me. My AMH levels were actually really high. So I had a lot of eggs, but unfortunately a lot of them were not good. Most of them weren't good. So I was—
How was that determined? By IVF?
Yeah, I would do retrievals and I'd get like 30 embryo or 30 eggs and maybe one would be good if I was lucky. So there was definitely that challenge. And I had a series of miscarriages all very, very early on.
Were those unexplained?
Yes. So I was never able to like keep a pregnancy. Like I just kept miscarrying, chemical pregnancy, miscarriage. And, there was some speculation of endometriosis, some possibility of like the shape of my uterus causing issues. And then, the other part of it was just that it was unexplained why it was difficult for me to produce like good quality eggs and also to be able to maintain pregnancy. So I did like, IVF, I did a bunch of medicated IUI, I did Clomid, I did natural cycle. The part that was so challenging was that it was hard for me to get good eggs. So every embryo felt so precious. So every time there was a miscarriage or a failed transfer or disappointment, it was like I felt the pressure of like, can I do another retrieval? I had kind of hyperstimulation. It was, like as I mentioned, like hard to get, and the years kept ticking by.
How crazy frustrating that must have been to have a bunch of them and to have them be so few that you could work with. I had the opposite. I had not very many, but the one or two that I had made Kira and Jack.
Yeah.
So that was really interesting how this whole process forces you to ask yourself over and over on a deep level, what do I really believe? What do I believe is in my future? What do I believe my body can do? What do I think? What level can I go to? How committed am I to this idea of becoming a parent?
Yeah.
It's like jumping into a swimming pool and hoping that it's filled with water, kind of.
And the tricky part about that is it's like you're also making those you're also thinking about those things, you're looking at that, being really introspective, but you're also struggling. So it's like you're not at your like base level of like, in terms of your emotional state, in terms of your physical state. Your body's been through all these hormones, your emotions are all over the place. So there is a bit of a filter on that. Sometimes it's hard to be positive. Sometimes it's hard to have hope. Sometimes you have anger, and all those things definitely change your perspective.
And throughout the cycle, there's going to be certain times where there's more insecurity than other times of the cycle. And there's certain times where you just literally give up, throw your hands in the air, flatline, and other times where you think like, oh, we totally have this.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's one of the things that I teach the women, because my goal is to normalize what's happening so that we can remove some of the shame and stigma, because that is not helping anything. If that was something, if shame and fear and rage actually moved the needle forward and helped women get to their babies faster, then I would help elicit that. But it's kind of like I help them to release it at certain times of the month with like journal prompts or questions, things for them to be thinking about, or to help them hear themselves.
Yeah.
Like, for example, yesterday I did a Zoom with a woman who's 46 years old, and they froze embryos without testing them like 6 years ago.
Okay.
And they only got 4 at that point, and they've gone through 3, and they've had a couple of chemical pregnancies. So obviously the 4th one that's there, they can't do any more retrievals. Potentially. I mean, it's going to be hard to find a doctor that will do that.
Yeah, for sure.
But she also has like an autoimmune disorder, and her mood was really hyped up with good reason. But I had to say, like, you have to calm yourself down and calm your system down, because now the only thing you can control, because that egg is frozen, all you can do is help thaw it and warm it and cook it correctly with a properly preheated oven, right?
Yeah.
Like, it was really clear to me. I always have a choice, just like you. We always have a choice in what we say to our clients, because we know that they will hang on our words. They're looking at us to give them hope or explanations or whatever. So I said, listen, that aggressive attitude, as she like pummeled me with 9 emails to get my attention about a Zoom link. So I was like, that was too much. And I'm not an egg cell or an embryo. Like, please, awareness. And the need to down regulate the nervous system. That will help the uterus to be more receptive energetically.
No, that makes the complete sense.
How do you keep your clients focused on the process and keep them in the moment?
So I think, I really try and talk to them about like, it's really easy to get overwhelmed when we're thinking about like surrogacy egg donation, because so many ways to start, so many decisions to make that feel like very life altering, big, decisions. So I try and really help them to take things in digestible steps, like let's not put in front of us all the things that we need to do and decide. Let's start where we are, right? So it's like one small thing. What do we need to do to get that thing done? And to try and focus on that, because it's really easy to kind of get paralysis when you have too much in front of you. And the other thing is too is, I try and be as supportive emotionally as I can. It's like if you want to talk to me about the concrete things, like what we're sorting through with profiles or what we're talking about with, getting contracts done. But if you also want to just talk to me about where you're at and you want some help to kind of perspective or just someone to listen, like I'm always happy to do that too, because I have a lot of empathy for what, people are going through in terms of, this whole experience, given my own experience. And I also really feel grateful and blessed to be able to kind of walk that journey with somebody, from an emotional part too. It gives me a lot of joy to give back in that way. I mean, of course, not joy that they're suffering, but so I really try and do that. And then, just like I said, just kind of being like, it's okay with wherever you're at today. Let's just be in the moment, work through whatever it is and focus on next steps. And I think that kind of really helps to just stay in that place, because it's so easy to go down the rabbit hole and think like, well, what if she does this? And what if she eats that? And what if this happens? And what if the doctor? And what if the, and it's just like, we're not there yet. That hasn't happened. And let's think about, I also try and be really proactive and advocate for them. Like, let's think about the things that can take those worries down a notch. Like, what can we do to prepare? How can we think about, what your concerns are and what can we do now? So it's not so much like, taking it all in one big chunk, but, being proactive, I think sometimes helps too, because I do have the awareness of like what to think about, forethought to think about in the future, and, how we can kind of prepare to avoid situations that might arise.
Yeah, you sure do. Do you think you could narrow down, like, what are the 3 things that they ask you, or what are a few things that they ask you on a regular basis? Because I'll tell you where I'm coming from.
Okay.
So my patients will ask similar questions at similar parts of the journey. And when the questions start to slow down, and maybe they'll ask me a question or two about how I'm doing, that always tells me that the spirit of a mother is really coming forth in them, where they're trying to nurture me. And that tells me that they are farther along on a readiness spectrum, getting closer and closer, where something will shift. Either they'll get that normal embryo, or they'll get that positive test, or they'll clear that trajectory. So what are some of the questions that you hear over and over that kind of lead you to know, oh, she's ready to pick a profile, or she's ready to do surrogacy, or she's ready to use an egg donor?
Well, I think for me, it's not so much questions that key me into that. There are a lot of questions that people ask me, pretty frequently, whether it's surrogacy, egg donor, kind of similar. So that's kind of one part of it. And the other part of it is, I think for me, when I really notice that people have started to organize around things differently internally, is when I start to see some kind of excitement, or some kind of planning for the future, or some kind of, when people start asking me questions like, oh, can you send me your list for registry? Or will you send me the list, the surrogacy to-do checklist? Or we're thinking about the hospital and like, what do we need to bring? Or how does this work? Or we're thinking about like, what scan should we go to? Even in the beginning when they first get a positive beta, or they start asking questions that are less just what if this and what if that, and more like, we're planning for a future, and whether it's
they're seeing themselves out in the future.
Yeah.
Tara Lipinski, she has her podcast called Unexpecting.
Yes.
And it takes about 16 episodes for her to get to meeting Michaela. And when I interviewed her, I reminded her of this pivotal point, because I had watched on a really intimate level each of those losses that she had. I have some very prophetic dreams that have moved me along on my professional and personal life path. But one day I had this lucid dream in the morning where I saw Tara and myself and another female on her team, and the 3 of us were at Cedars in the VIP area. And it was like, she's coming, and the baby was going to be handed to Tara. We hadn't talked about surrogacy, but I saw it like it was obvious a third party, but I didn't even make that connection. I just was able to finally have my spirit be at rest to know, oh, her girl does get here. And so then I kept telling her that, like, listen, because I have seen some of them. I do Reiki here in the Well People treatment rooms, and they will show up. Sometimes they're just like a little flash. And I'm curious if this happens for you too, but like sometimes it's a little flash. Sometimes I'll do like an energy healing, and I will see, oh, it's a girl coming. She's got this color hair. It's a boy. He wants you to know this or that before they get here. Like, it's just energy. And acupuncturists are trained to read energy.
Yeah.
Right. So it's not like Danica's magical or whatever. It's that trained, like a workout muscle training. It's a psychic training or whatever, energy.
Totally. Yeah.
But it's really like to know those things for the patients to some extent. I can't guarantee anything that I see is going to come true.
Of course. Yeah.
But I can feel it.
Yeah.
And it feels consistent. And the more that I feel it, the the more it happens to come through that way, and I can count on it. So when I had that dream about Tara, I was like, I know with certainty. And then very soon, she made the decision.
It's incredible.
Todd and I decided we're going to use a surrogate.
It's incredible. It's amazing.
Yeah. So this idea that the uterus is a second heart,
Yeah.
that to me means the unprocessed grief and emotions or joy for life flows out of the first heart and into the womb.
Yeah.
Can you speak on the level of emotionality that you see in your intended parents and compare that to how some of the surrogates have this fertile confidence? They only know pregnancy and the other one only knows disappointment.
You know, it's an interesting thing because it's a journey that two families oftentimes are doing together, and they're really coming from two different parts of life, like when it comes to, you know, the reproductive experience, you know. So a lot of the surrogates, as you mentioned, like most of them, I mean, have had at least one, often 2, 3, maybe 4 pregnancies that have been smooth, easy. They've never had to worry about having kids. It's come naturally to them. And the intended parents they're working with most all the time have had, unless they have another reason for doing surrogacy, have had hardships and disappointments and a lack of hope. So I think, you know, it kind of, sometimes in the beginning, it can be difficult to be coming from different aspects in that realm because, you know, the surrogate's really excited and the intended parents are sometimes tentative. So, you know, the surrogate's like, oh, great, I got a positive beta. This baby's coming in 9 months. Like, you know, like ready
that would
to
be terrifying for the IP.
Yeah. So it's
right?
like, you know, but for her, that's her experience. So she's like, I'm packing my bags for the hospital, you know, and the intended parents, you know, and this is not across the board because every intended parent is different. But some intended parents are like, okay, we have a positive beta and like, that's good for this week. And let's see what happens next week. But, you know, so I think sometimes that can be a challenge, but that at other times, you know, it can be a blessing because where an intended mom is so used to struggling so much with trusting her body and having faith and carrying that kind of anxiety and fear that you're right does affect how you carry a baby and ultimately probably what the experience is. You know, how much science plays a role is part of it, of course, but I think for a surrogate to be able to see the person carrying your baby to be calm and to feel good and to be bringing that energy to a baby that isn't impacted by all the loss and grief and fear, I think feels like the first great parenting choice to a lot of parents. You know, for me, I remember someone said that to me and it really resonated. Like, think of this as your first parenting choice that is difficult.
I love this.
But that is the best thing for your child because your body, you know, no fault of your own, hasn't been safe and it hasn't felt safe for you. And so I can imagine, you know, I didn't end up getting to move forward with any of my pregnancies, but I can imagine, you know, even in the early stages, I remember, you know, being early pregnant, going to acupuncture and like crying because I'm like, I'm just so scared. I don't want to have another miscarriage. I hope this baby's going to be okay. And I think, you know, knowing that I put my embryo in somebody who doesn't have that experience and who could bring kind of nothing but that calm and hope and joy and peace, safety really felt like a decision I could be proud of, even though it was hard.
Yeah. I have goosebumps. That's so well said. And makes such sense because we know the gestational period.
Yeah.
Like I'm connected to some of the maternal mental health and psychiatrists for reproductive cases. And there's a case for women on the journey to take an antidepressant because they have done studies. They know that those pregnant women might not eat well or do the best self-care while pregnant because it's even more estrogen in the system. It could be even more overwhelming or depressed or scary.
Yeah. And, you know, that reminds me, it's often the case too for women. And this is the thing that like breaks my heart the most when I have clients who've had stillborn pregnancies. And, you know, for them, oftentimes, you know, they choose surrogacy, of course, because they want to have a healthy baby. But a lot of them too, they just can't manage that kind of heartbreak, that kind of trauma, that kind of just complete and utter despair. And I think that must be hard. I've had clients who've actually gotten pregnant after a stillborn birth and like just what that carrying that much grief and fear is like, it must be so hard. And
I've
so
had patients in that scenario too. And one of them in particular had a 6-year-old son who was waiting to meet his sister.
oh God.
So
yeah.
the rippling effect
Breaks
for
my
that,
heart.
it was a lot. And because it was a girl, they kept trying and trying and trying for girl embryos, and they kept getting boy embryos. And so then, like the little boy, what was that saying of "we want a girl"? Here we have a boy already. Like it just it that fertility PTSD, the PTSD that comes from that type of loss that's that far along, is just so unfair.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to switch into something that felt so sweet, and it's that device that you were telling me about.
Oh, right.
Because for the women who like, will you tell what it is?
It's called a bond touch. And what it is it's a bracelet that kind of simulates, it looks like a watch, and it kind of simulates the feeling of a hug. And it's meant for people who are far apart in distance to feel and be connected. And in surrogacy, it's often used for the surrogate and the intended mom. And the surrogate will wear the watch, and every time she feels a flutter or a kick or, any kind of movement from the baby, she taps the watch. And then the mom will feel a little bit of like a hug wrapped around her wrist. And
so great.
I just think it's so incredible because just, as an intended mom, you think about like those things that you're missing feeling inside your body, and just that connection of being able to be in the experience, even though it's not in your body, and being connected to like that when your baby's moving. And, I think is.
Does the watch work? I didn't mean to interrupt you. Does the watch work both ways?
Yes.
So the mom can say, "I'm thinking of you,
Yes.
baby," and surrogate. And,
Yeah.
Oh, that's
And I just
great.
wanted to tap this so I can send you just like a little hug on your wrist that lets you know like that I'm here and I'm thinking of you guys and wanting to connect.
So good.
A lot of intended moms like get comfort from using it and just being able to feel that connection. And belly buds as well, which belly buds are they're like headphones that you can put, a surrogate mom can put on her stomach, and the sound only goes into her stomach. She won't hear it. But there's an app that the intended parents and surrogate can download, and the intended parents can record their voices. They can record themselves reading stories. They can record music. They can record siblings. And it's great because once the baby is started to able to hear outside the womb, the mom can sit and watch TV, or she can work. Not the mom, I'm sorry, the surrogate.
The surrogate's just watching TV or whatever, but the belly is listening to what the intended mom has put.
Yes. Yeah. So that's a lot of intended parents like to use that just because it gives them comfort to know baby is hearing their voices, or the music that they like, or stories.
This is so wild where we are.
I know, right?
So good. How are surrogates and egg donors, because you do third party, I'm just going to kind of lump them together here.
Yeah.
How are these third party women screened? Like, I guess, what types of questions are they asked? Do you know?
Yeah, you mean from a psychological perspective?
Yeah, if I was going to pursue this, I'd want to know, like, what's the bare minimum questions that these screeners, you're not doing the screening, but this, like, what is being asked of these women?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a couple levels of this. Of course, the agency will do a full screen, which includes a background check, oftentimes a home visit, a full examination of the records, OB records, previous births, and of course, questions about the surrogate's health, about her lifestyle, about her family, all the things that they would want to know that would be pertinent in that way. And then there's the psych eval, which is kind of what we're talking about, which is the evaluation that's done with the surrogate just to determine that she would be appropriate to do a surrogacy journey. Part of it is kind of like her history, her pregnancy history, her mental health during those pregnancies and deliveries. And then the other part of it is, what are her expectations of a surrogacy journey? And has she, when you're kind of looking online and you're seeing advertisements for surrogacy, or your friend tells you, you probably think about I mean, I'm not in their shoes, but you probably think about like what that would be like and why you would want to do it. And of course, the financial incentive is nice. But there are things like, are they anticipating, do they know what shots are going to be like? And, what do they think that taking hormones might be like for them? And have they thought about what it might be like to carry a baby and then hand that baby over? And
Or how is it going to affect their relationship?
yes, and how is it going to affect their children? And are they going to speak with their children about it? And I think really the main purpose of this, of course, is to make sure that someone is emotionally stable in general, and also to make sure that they've really thought it through, all the facets, and whether it be themselves or their family, and so they're prepared for and okay with what they're signing up for. Because you really want, if a surrogate's committing to this, it's a huge decision and a big choice, of course. And I think part of the psych eval is making sure that, knowing everything, that she kind of feels okay with moving forward. An example, I once had a surrogate whose husband had just recovered from a cancer journey. And, she hadn't necessarily thought about like, what if it comes back and what that might be like? Because it was a pretty serious, unfortunately, cancer that had a high reoccurrence rate. So that was a big part of the psych eval is, have you thought about this? And if so, like, what will that be like if you're carrying a baby? And like, are you going to feel comfortable being in that space? And what will that be like for your kids? And so I think a lot of it is just, aside from, just psychological stability, is like, thinking about how this works in your life and that you feel good and prepared for that.
Yeah. The readiness factor, and that they have that certain level of maturity and higher understanding of what exactly it is that they're doing, what they're providing for a woman. And then we have to trust that they're telling the truth and that the screener is really paying attention on that day.
And a lot of times too, doctors get concerned if surrogates have had like a long history of like psychotropic medications or in and out of depressive episodes, or maybe have a huge family history of major mental illnesses, just because, of course, taking medications during pregnancy, especially for a surrogate, isn't usually permitted for, mental health things. So I think, doctors just really want to ensure that there's not that in the history, so that there's not a concern that that could come up during a surrogacy journey. Mm-hmm. So that's a big part of it.
Mm-hmm. We've had a patient who had a surrogate with a drug history that she withheld, and then it was found. And so like the intended mom kind of had a sense, and then somehow it came through. There was like a urine screening or something that had to be done. Like it is, I think, would you say most of the time it's like the screening kind of rules out the ones that are messing around?
Yeah. I mean, just what you said is like, that's the kind of things that intended parents hear and hold on to, or these stories where somebody's surrogate wasn't honest. In anything we do in life, we run into this, right? People that are dishonest, people that aren't ethical. And I think because this is such a big deal, someone's life and someone's baby, I think it becomes hyper-focused because it's such an important thing. And so I'm not going to say it doesn't happen sometimes, that somebody doesn't turn out to be necessarily who they said. I would say it's much more rare than what actually usually does happen, which is a surrogate ends up being lovely and just wants to help. I think, the psych eval is a really great tool to weed out those kind of situations, because the psychologist is trained and, an expert in kind of asking questions that will get to those answers. But I really also think that like being matched with the right surrogate, doing a good match call will give you also some insight into who somebody is, and give you a little bit of an intuition, not just concretely like what is their history, XYZ, but like what is this person's, like what does their character seem like? What are they putting out? What energy am I getting from them? So I think that also helps too, is the intended parents kind of barometer. And what I try to do as well, barometer, is like, is this someone I can trust?
Yeah. I've also found that the more neurotic the IP is, the more they will draw to them reasons to be like nervous about it, or things that are suspicious and problematic, because it's a frequency. It's again the energy, right?
And that's a balance. And that's like a major part of, for me, what I do is finding that balance, because, on one hand, intended parents do have a right to have preferences and feel one way or another about the things that are not happening. But on the other hand, this is also someone's life and their body. And so they also, to some degree, need to be trusted. So it's about finding that balance of like, with my IPs about, okay, which things do we want to pursue and we want to push? And which things do we just kind of have to have faith and trust and relinquish some of the control, And it's about finding that balance, because there will be times that we're like, this is important to us. Let's push this. And there are other times where it's like, okay, I got to work this out within me.
Yeah. The same is true with respect to helping them get their embryos as they're doing their cycles. It's really like, what are we going to put the focus onto?
Yeah.
Let's shift gears for a minute into egg donors.
Yes.
Egg donation is really a charged topic.
Yeah.
Right? For good reason.
Yeah.
What do you tell your gals that find themselves over in that camp?
This is a little bit, I do work with a lot of clients using egg donors. I try and be more careful in this area because I haven't had personal experience.
Mm-hmm.
So I think when you've had personal experience in something, it's a little bit easier to kind of speak to people directly about what that experience is. And I try and be really sensitive to the fact that even though I can empathize, like I wasn't in those shoes.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say I've had a lot of friends and clients that have had that experience and have used egg donors. So I really, for them, I just start where they're at. And, we start talking about, what they're, where they're at with it, what they're hoping for, what they're looking for. A lot of times they have questions. And so I'll answer their questions at a concrete level, like when it comes to, the legal stuff, when it comes to what we're looking for, what's realistic,
I would think that what's led them here, if you have that as part of where they are at, right? Like what's led you here so they can, in hearing their own story, they might start to let go of how it's had a hold on them.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I always offer too is if you want to speak to somebody who's already, had their child, who's used an egg donor, who's been through this experience and is on the other side, I would be more than happy to connect you. I mean, of course, only with somebody who is comfortable with that. But I do fortunately have a handful of clients and friends who, as I experience with surrogacy, are to the other side, and it brings them happiness to bring hope.
Right.
Because I do have people that have started from the beginning with me that have kind of had a hard time wrapping their head around this choice and going in this direction. I mean, choice, is a loose word.
That's when you really are working a reframe. And you're in the gratitude state. You can say it was a choice.
This is the way for them to become a parent. This is what's doable.
Yeah.
And so I do try and connect them if I can. And then, I also talk to them of kind of like how the process works and what it looks like. And I think when people get walked through the tangibles and the steps and how it all looks, it does become a little bit more comforting, because I think the unknown of like, okay, so we're going to find this egg and where are we going to find it? And what are the legal ramifications?
It's never going to look like me.
Yes. And what are we, and then, when we start to get into it, and hopefully, also what I don't do is when we're looking at profiles, I don't send profiles that I think are going to be like a miss. I'm not about like giving people, 30 different profiles to look
just to
for.
Give them 30.
Yeah, because I think that can sometimes feel like not exactly like filling people with hope, and can feel disappointing and can feel frustrating. So I try and really like hopefully, and the first or second or third or even 10th may not be the one that they want, but I try, and I'm hoping that it gives them hope to see that there are some amazing options. And it's incredible. I recently had a colleague or a client and a friend who delivered a baby via egg donor, using an egg donor. And it's so interesting because the baby looks exactly like her.
They
and it's like
do
this
so frequently.
Really interesting.
So interesting.
Yeah. And I believe, and I tell people this sometimes when they feel open to it. I try not to insert my own beliefs or experience, but as a therapist and as somebody with a mental health background, and as a parent now, I really believe that so much of children are who we raise them to be, are part of us, not because just of their DNA, but because of, how we walk through life with them. And, I see this in my own children, and I know that they are, that we are, I am connected in that way as well. But I really, do believe that when people do get the experience to have their child born, and, you know, that child is theirs and theirs to raise for the rest of their life, and they experience all of the joy of that and all of the challenges that come with it, that they start to see it in a different light. And I can't tell you, like, I'll say this, whether it's egg donation or surrogacy, however these babies come to be, or both, there's nothing better about what I do for me than the day that baby comes. Like, if it's 3 a.m, if it's 4 a.m, my husband will be like, Marly, it's in the middle of the night. I'm like, shh, shh, go in the other room.
Yeah.
Like,
I need to know how this.
I need the picture. I need the time. I need the, and every time I cry, you know, and it's just because seeing people struggle and seeing them, and, you know, even if it takes them a minute to integrate this kind of, okay, this has happened, and sometimes it does, but just seeing that come to life and seeing people actually get to the end of all this investment and all this hardship is the biggest joy I could possibly experience. So that's, you know.
For sure it is. Yeah.
I mean, you know, from your experience.
But mine's slightly different in that I'm helping them to get the right conditions optimized for a pregnancy.
Yes.
And we get that, and then I'll get like an update. But remember, with the SEED program, that's international and throughout the US. And a lot of them, they don't think to remember to hit the tracking device or to send me an email because they don't have any other interaction with me. So there's a lot more of them and I won't know. But the ones that I know, I just kind of get like I just want to let you know it worked, or they'll send a photo later on. But mostly I get to find out that it worked, and then they cleared the 12 weeks and they're, you know, they know that it's all working out. But that whatever it is, it's that closure for them and for us and for all of us to come full circle. It does feel so good because we see them at the beginning.
Yeah.
Or at the hardest part.
Yeah.
The pivot.
Yeah.
Right? They're either going to pivot into it works, or they're going to pivot into they make a decision.
Yeah.
And then like whatever that is that takes them to the next level. So as we are approaching Mother's Day, I thought that you would be such a good person to share some insight, some perspective. Without putting you too much on the spot, what's something you would like to share with the women listeners out there that are just not too happy about middle of May?
Right. Gosh, this is a hard one because I know these times are hard, you know, whether it's Mother's Day or whether it's holidays, whether it's, you know, seeing, baby showers, seeing your friends, your family, you know, I think it's really about just kind of maintaining some semblance of hope, you know? I mean, I think it's like, you know, as I said this before, the only thing worse than having feelings of whatever it is, whether it's anger, whether it's sadness, whether it's shame, when you're approaching something like Mother's Day, is feeling bad about it. You know, feeling shame about the way you feel, or feeling like I'm not this person. I'm somebody who's happy, or I'm somebody who's positive. And why am I sitting here and feeling like I hate this day? And, you know, I am in a place where I feel whatever it is, angry, sad.
Just let it be what it is.
Yeah. And I think it's okay. Like, I think part of it is like, you know, it's what I said before. It's like, if today feels like you can find the happiness in whatever it is, whether it's your mom, whether it's your grandma, whether it's your sister, like, that's great. If today feels like it's a day that feels unfair and a reminder of what you don't have, and that's hard, that's also okay. You know, I had that experience a lot of, you know, several different Mother's Days. But I think, you know, if you can just have hope and know that there are lots of ways to become parents. And even though those ways might not be where you are right now, or, you know, regardless of why, like, there is a lot of opportunity. And sometimes when you get to the things that look different, even though they do look different and can be hard getting to that decision, there's also light at the end of the tunnel when, you know, you get to a place that will bring you to the end goal, which is, you know, being parents. And I think that a lot of the most that I hear from moms, especially who are struggling, is just like, I don't have a guarantee. You know, like, I do not have a guarantee this is going to happen. And so people want to tell me, like, it'll happen. Just keep going and keep doing the best you can. And I think that's the hardest thing to, like, grapple with. But I do think that with all of these different ways that we're talking about and all of these opportunities, that, you know, if you kind of just keep putting one foot in front of you and, you know, doing your best to kind of self-care, practice the things that fill your cup, because this situation depletes it. And for me, like, really focus on what those things are and make sure that you take care of yourself, because these things can be hard. And, so all I guess I can say is, for me, I've been there, I've struggled a lot of years, and, being on the other side, I see how kind of sometimes these different routes can bring, I believe, just as much joy and, the goal of parenthood, which I think everyone deserves. And my wish and prayer for every woman or man, wanting that, is that they put themselves out there and do what they can, no matter what it looks like, to get there.
Yeah. All right. I advise them as much as they can to keep their heart and their mind open, and to allow the situation to shift in the way that's in the highest good of everyone involved.
Yeah.
That would kind of imply that they are going to passively, instead of like fighting it, they're going to passively allow the situation to change such that the right carrier or the right egg donor is put in their field, and as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
Right? To set that as an intention. And if energy follows our thoughts and we say that to ourselves enough, I allow the situation to shift in the way that's for the highest good of everyone involved and as quickly as possible. And they say that enough times, they do see something shift. And, that's what it's about.
Yeah.
Then they have to be there with it, right? But willingness to keep the mind open, willingness to keep the heart open. That is how we attract things to us that we want, whether it's a mate or a child.
And I think part of that too is connection. So, whether that looks like connecting with someone like you, or connecting with your doctor, or connecting with someone who's been through something similar, or, connection makes you feel less alone, So like for me, it's easy, to avoid talking to people, or to avoid kind of like asking a bunch of questions or looking into things because of what that might make you feel, like opening that chapter of like looking into egg donation or surrogacy. But I think as hard as it is sometimes, I can't tell you how many times people tell me, I actually start talking to everyone. I start talking to, concierge services, agencies, doctors, really started opening my mind to like getting my questions answered and really looking at this head on, like what is third party? What will it look like? And that information calmed them. That information made them feel better, because instead of just thinking about all the worst case things and like avoiding what it looks like, really getting out there. And like, I always just encourage people, talk to as many people as possible. Even when people call me for an intake, I'm like, don't just talk to me, like talk to the agencies, talk to other, like find out who's right for you. And I think that if you do find the right person to be on this journey with you, at least one, I mean, the right team's great, but whether it be a doctor or an agency or someone like myself or a psychologist, I think that will help so much to feel less alone and to be armed with information and knowledge and like knowing how to being kind of navigated and guide through something, I think is really helpful.
Mm-hmm. Me too. I've looked at a number of profiles over the years, and it's been the right thing, whether it's like a sperm donor or an egg donor. And I just commend the women, men, and couples that are having the courage to go that way, to pursue what they want. Right?
Even when it's hard.
Especially when it's hard.
And that's the thing, it's like part of life is going through those hard things. And, it's like the only way through, the only way around is through,
This applies here so well. So for listeners that want to find you, how would they do that?
You can go to surrogacybymarly.com.
Marly.
Marly. You can, if you put in Google my first and last name, it'll probably come up. So you can do that. And then my number is listed on my website. So it's a number that you can text me at or call me. Or there's also a link to click that you can email me as well.
That's amazing. Okay. So it's like, if you're having any inklings, just book a session. And just start the conversation. That's another thing I've advised my patients.
Yes.
Just, can we please just look at the profiles? Because that resistance to, or the belief that there's not going to be one that they will have a resonance with.
Yeah.
And then to see like, well, actually I saw somebody,
Yeah. I mean, typically they won't usually see profiles right away unless you like start working with an agency or a concierge service. But I think definitely you're right in the sense that like get the information. I mean, for me, I do consults with people. I give you all the information in terms of like the things to think about, what to look for, how this process will work. I recommend people talk to, legal, other agencies, really collect information. And then you're really able to make a choice, get a solid team. And even if you're just thinking about it and you want the information, it can't hurt just to like have a really good understanding of how it works, because it feels more real and weirdly doable when you hear like exactly how many people are involved. I mean, there's so many experts that are involved from a medical perspective, this from like a screening perspective, from a legal perspective, and just kind of hearing how structured and really comprehensive and how much support there is, whether you're looking at donation, egg donation, sperm donation, or surrogacy. I think it really helps to like really get all the information. So I always recommend that.